Michael thought he knew everything about his wife Amanda, until her old college friend, Jessica, came to stay. What began as a simple visit quickly turned into a psychological minefield, revealing secrets, testing loyalty, and tempting Michael to betray everything he held dear. But just when he reached the edge, fate stepped in. Michael sat on the living room couch with a novel in hand, but he hadn't turned a page in 15 minutes. His eyes were on the text, but his mind was stuck in the static of unease. From the kitchen, he could hear Amanda chopping vegetables and humming softly. It was a regular Tuesday evening in their quiet Oregon suburb, but the air felt off, like something was about to happen. Then, Amanda said it casually, as if she were announcing a change in dinner plans. "Oh, honey, I forgot to tell you. Jessica's coming to stay with us for a few days." Michael looked up, startled. Jessica. She didn't pause in her prep work. "Yeah, from college. I told you about her a long time ago." He searched his memory. "I don't think I've ever heard you mention her." Amanda shrugged, still focused on dinner. "We were close back then. She's just visiting from out of town and didn't want to waste money on a hotel." There was no trace of nervousness in her voice, no red flags, just that same easy tone she used when asking if they had milk. But something didn't sit right. Michael nodded slowly, then looked back at his book, though his mind had drifted far from the fictional world in his hands.
That night, lying beside Amanda in bed, he asked, "So how close were you two?" She turned off the bedside lamp. "Just friends. Really close friends, but it was college. You know how intense those friendships can get." Her response felt rehearsed. Michael didn't press further. He didn't want to seem paranoid. Still, he felt something he couldn't quite name. A subtle shift, like a door creaking open somewhere in the house that shouldn't have moved. 2 days later, Michael found himself pacing the living room. Amanda had gone to pick up Jessica from the station. He had offered to come along, but Amanda insisted on going alone. "She might be tired from the trip," she said. "Let me handle it." He tried to distract himself. He even cooked dinner, something he rarely did, hoping it would make a good impression. But as the clock ticked, the unease returned. When the front door finally opened, he stood awkwardly in the hallway. Jessica stepped inside, and immediately the atmosphere shifted. She was tall, confident, and carried herself like someone who knew exactly how people perceived her. Michael didn't know what he'd expected. Maybe someone quieter, plainer, but this wasn't it. Amanda lit up when she saw her. They embraced like sisters reunited after years of war, their laughter spilling into the room as if no time had passed. "Michael, this is Jessica," Amanda beamed. Jessica stepped forward, smiling warmly. "So you're the husband I've heard so much about?" Her handshake was firm, but it was her eyes that made Michael hesitate. There was curiosity in them, and something else. Not flirtation, exactly, just observation, like she was assessing him. Dinner that evening was filled with stories from their college days. Amanda and Jessica bounced off each other effortlessly, completing sentences, laughing at shared memories. Michael tried to keep up, laughing when appropriate, asking questions when he could, but mostly feeling like a guest in his own home. Then, mid-conversation, Amanda dropped the bomb. "You know, I never told you this," she said, turning to Michael with a glass of wine in hand. "Jessica and I used to date." Michael froze. "What?" Jessica chuckled quietly, swirling her wine. Amanda's tone remained light. "Yeah, it was brief. We were just figuring things out. College, experimentation, nothing serious. We moved on." Michael's smile stayed frozen, his fork covered in the air. "You never mentioned that." Amanda shrugged. "It didn't feel relevant. We broke up before graduation." The table went quiet for a beat too long, but then Jessica picked up the thread of another story and the laughter resumed. Michael smiled, nodded, played along, but his mind was still stuck on the revelation. Not because of jealousy, not entirely, but because something had shifted, and he couldn't undo it. That night, as Amanda slept beside him, breathing softly, Michael lay awake staring at the ceiling. He wasn't angry. Not yet. But a fracture had opened, one that didn't come from Amanda's past, but from the realization that she'd kept that past hidden. And now that past was staying in their guest room. He wasn't sure what disturbed him more, that she hadn't told him, or that he suddenly wanted to know more. By the next morning, Michael had convinced himself he was overreacting. Amanda's revelation about her past with Jessica had been unexpected, sure, but people had lives before marriage. It didn't change who she was now. That's what he told himself, repeatedly, as he waited for the coffee to brew. But when the two women came downstairs, talking, laughing, sharing inside jokes, he realized that the emotional distance he'd felt the night before hadn't disappeared. If anything, it had widened. Jessica greeted him with a cheerful "good morning," as if nothing unusual had been said at dinner. Amanda kissed his cheek like she always did, but something about it felt automatic, like a script being followed. The two women launched into stories from their college days, reminiscing freely, their connection fluid and unspoken. Michael sat there, sipping his coffee, more of an observer than a participant. Then Jessica told a story about a party. Amanda laughed, covering her face. "Don't remind me of that night. I couldn't walk the next day." Jessica grinned. "One of our best weekends." Michael watched the exchange closely. There was something about the way they looked at each other. It wasn't romantic, at least not overtly, but it carried a weight, an old rhythm still intact, the kind of connection that doesn't fade with time. That invisible current made him uneasy. Later that day, Amanda suggested a walk around the neighborhood park so Jessica could stretch her legs and get a feel for the area. Michael went along, mostly out of obligation. As they strolled the winding trails, Amanda and Jessica chatted ahead of him, shoulder to shoulder, their conversation flowing effortlessly. Michael trailed behind, trying to join in when he could, but every comment he made felt like an interruption. When Amanda brought up a beach trip she and Jessica had taken during spring break, Michael asked, "How was that trip?" Jessica turned to him with a calm smile. "Perfect. We rented a little house by the water. Every morning, Amanda would sit on the porch with her coffee and just stare at the waves. She was in her element." Amanda chuckled. "It was peaceful. A good memory." Michael nodded, but inside, something tightened. He didn't know that version of Amanda. He couldn't help but feel like an outsider trying to piece together a history he was never part of. Back at the house, he watched from the living room as Amanda and Jessica cooked dinner together. Their communication required few words, just glances and gestures. They moved in sync, finishing each other's tasks like they'd never stopped living together. Michael found himself staring too long. Jessica had a magnetic presence, unapologetically confident. She caught him watching and walked over to him, handing him a glass of wine. "Must be strange," she said, her voice low, calm. "Me showing up like this." He cleared his throat. "A little. Just surprised Amanda never mentioned you." Jessica looked at him for a beat and then said, "Maybe she didn't want to remember that time. It wasn't all good, you know." He wanted to ask what she meant. Instead, he nodded and took a sip. That night in bed, the silence between him and Amanda stretched longer than usual. He didn't want to start a fight, didn't even know what he'd accuse her of. But the distance was there, undeniable. He stared at the ceiling, feeling like a guest in his own home. The next few days passed like this, quietly charged. Michael found himself scrutinizing everything. The tone of Amanda's laugh, the glances she shared with Jessica, the ease with which they moved through each room. It wasn't that he suspected Amanda of anything, not exactly, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that something was shifting, that something had been unlocked when Jessica arrived. One night, after dinner, Amanda went upstairs to take a shower. Jessica lingered in the kitchen rinsing wine glasses. Michael walked in to grab some water, but froze when Jessica turned to him. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You've been quiet." He forced a smile. "Just tired." Jessica dried her hand slowly. "You know, Amanda really loves you. She talks about you a lot." The comment should have comforted him. Instead, it confused him. "Yeah, I know." She studied him for a moment, like she wanted to say something more, but instead she nodded and walked past him, the air shifting with her presence. Later that night, as Amanda drifted off beside him, Michael lay wide awake again. Jessica was just a house guest, and yet her presence had taken up so much space, emotionally, mentally, and Amanda, she seemed different. Not distant, but divided. Like she was straddling two timelines, one foot in the past, the other still trying to belong to the present. Michael didn't know what to do with that. He didn't even know if there was anything to do. But the tension was rising, slowly, relentlessly, and Jessica wasn't going anywhere just yet. It was a Thursday evening when the line between discomfort and danger finally began to blur. Michael had spent most of the day trying to act normal, working from his laptop, checking emails, taking calls, but his focus kept drifting. Amanda and Jessica had gone shopping together that afternoon, leaving him alone with his thoughts. That should have been a break. It wasn't.
He replayed conversations in his head, tried to make sense of body language, glances, pauses. He told himself he was being ridiculous, but every time Jessica laughed at something Amanda said, every time Amanda looked a little too amused, a little too light around her, something in Michael tightened. That night they all sat down for dinner. Jessica poured the wine, Amanda talked about a weekend trip they could all take, and Michael tried to keep pace. But halfway through the meal, Jessica leaned across the table and asked Amanda, "Do you remember that cabin we rented junior year in the mountains?" Amanda laughed. "Where we got snowed in? That was wild." Jessica smiled. "We never left the bed for 2 days." Michael's hand froze on his fork. Amanda's face flushed slightly. "We were young." Jessica didn't let up. "We were happy." The silence that followed was brief, but it said enough. Amanda cleared her throat and changed the subject. Michael didn't speak again until dinner was over. That night, Amanda went to shower. Michael stood alone in the kitchen, cleaning up. Jessica walked in, moving past him to rinse her glass. She didn't speak at first, but then she dried her hands, turned, and looked at him. "You've been different since I got here." Michael didn't respond. She stepped closer, not aggressive, but direct. "Do you want to ask me something?" He stared at her. "Why did you really come?" Jessica tilted her head. "To see Amanda." "That's not all." She paused, then gave the smallest shrug. "Maybe I wanted to see what her life looks like now, what she chose over me." Michael didn't know how to respond. The air between them thickened. Then, with a calm that made his stomach twist, Jessica said, "I see the way you look at me." He froze. "You think I don't notice?" she added, voice low. "You wonder what we had, what it was like? You're curious."
Michael's heart pounded. "Stop." Jessica didn't move. "Amanda told me once that you were the safest choice. That's not a bad thing, by the way. Stability is underrated. But she's never stopped being drawn to chaos." "That's enough," he said, louder now. Jessica backed off, slowly. "I'm not trying to ruin anything, Michael, but I think you're more like her than you realize." She walked away, leaving him standing in the middle of the kitchen, blood hot, chest tight. That night he couldn't sleep. Amanda lay beside him, breathing steadily, her body turned away. Michael stared at the ceiling, heart thudding. It was past midnight when he finally left the bed and went downstairs, hoping a glass of water would calm him. That's when he saw her, Jessica, in the kitchen, completely unaware he was there. She wasn't dressed. The sight stopped him cold. She moved slowly, casually, as if this were her home too. She filled a glass, drank, then turned toward the hallway, and saw him. Neither of them said a word. Jessica's expression didn't change. She gave him a single glance, then disappeared into the guest room, door closing quietly behind her. Michael stood in the hallway, frozen. Every nerve in his body screamed something different. Run, speak, confront, confess. But he did nothing. He returned to the bedroom, lay down, and kept his eyes open until the sky turned pale. When Amanda stirred beside him hours later, he was still wide awake, replaying the moment. That morning at breakfast, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Jessica and Amanda talked about going hiking. Michael tried to eat, but his stomach churned. Every word Jessica spoke felt like a double meaning. Every glance calculated. At one point, Amanda got up to check something in the laundry room. Jessica leaned over the table and whispered, "Did you like what you saw?" Michael's fork clattered onto his plate. Jessica smiled faintly, then sipped her coffee. Amanda returned seconds later, oblivious. Michael sat in stunned silence for the rest of the meal. He didn't confront her. He didn't say a word to Amanda. He told himself he needed time to think, to figure out what was real, what was provocation, what was manipulation. But deep down he knew the truth. A line had been crossed. Even if no one had physically acted on it, the boundary had shattered. And Jessica had made it clear, she wasn't done yet. Michael couldn't shake the sound of her voice. "Did you like what you saw?" It echoed in his mind like a dare. All day it sat there, quiet but relentless, pressing against every attempt to pretend nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Whether Amanda knew it or not, the ground beneath their marriage had shifted. And Jessica was still here, still moving freely through their home, still watching him with that unsettling calm. That afternoon, the three of them sat in the backyard. Amanda flipped through her phone. Jessica stretched out under the sun, eyes closed, relaxed, as if she belonged there. Michael pretended to read, but his thoughts were scattered. When Jessica asked casually if she could take off her bikini top to avoid tan lines, Amanda barely looked up. "Sure," she said. "Whatever makes you comfortable." Michael's pulse jumped. Jessica turned to him. "Is that okay with you, Michael?" He looked up, caught her gaze, and felt a jolt of panic. He hesitated, then gave a weak nod. "Yeah, it's fine." Jessica smiled. "Thanks." She lay back down, and Michael lowered his eyes, pretending to focus on the pages in front of him, but reading nothing. That night, as Amanda showered, he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. He wanted to confess everything. What he'd seen, what Jessica had said, how twisted everything had become inside his head. But how do you tell your wife that you've been teetering on the edge of betrayal without crossing it? When Amanda came out, drying her hair, he asked, "Why did you and Jessica break up?" She paused, caught off guard. "I told you. It was just college." "But what really happened? Why did it end?"
Amanda sat down, the question sinking in. "She's intense," she said quietly. "At first it was exciting, but then it was too much. She needed things I couldn't keep up with, emotionally, physically. She was always chasing something, more passion, more control, more attention. I felt like I was losing myself. I had to walk away." Michael nodded, but the ache in his chest deepened. Jessica's behavior suddenly made sense. She hadn't changed. She was still chasing, still testing limits.
And now, he was the limit. That night he didn't sleep. He lay beside Amanda feeling like a traitor. Not because he had done anything physical, but because he had let it get this far in his head. He had imagined it, entertained it. He had let the fantasy take root. And worse, he wasn't sure he wanted it to stop. When he finally drifted off near dawn, it was only for a few minutes. He woke up exhausted, on edge. Downstairs, Amanda and Jessica were already having breakfast. Jessica greeted him with a casual smile, as if the last 24 hours hadn't happened. Amanda handed him coffee, chatting about the day's plans. Everything looked normal, but Michael felt like he was choking on the pretense. He needed air. "I'm going to grab a bottle of wine for dinner," he said suddenly. Amanda looked surprised. "Now?" "We're almost out," he mumbled, already grabbing his keys. He drove aimlessly at first. Then he stopped at a liquor store 10 minutes away. Inside, he wandered down the aisles, barely noticing the bottles. That's when he saw him. A man in his 60s, hunched over, reading a label. Something about him, his posture, the way he moved, reminded Michael of his father. It hit him harder than expected. His father had passed away 2 years ago. A quiet man, a steady man. The kind who didn't say much, but always seemed to know what was right. And one thing he always said, especially when Michael was young and impulsive, echoed back now. When temptation calls, don't answer. Go outside. Get quiet. Pray if you believe in anything. Don't make a choice in the dark. Michael stood frozen in the aisle, the bottle in his hand, suddenly feeling heavier than glass should. He set it back down, walked out. Outside, he sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, fighting the urge to cry. What was he doing? Jessica was a temptation, not a partner, a distraction, not a future. And Amanda, his wife, wasn't perfect, but she had chosen him. She had built a life with him, trusted him. He couldn't throw that away for a fantasy. He didn't drive home right away. He sat there, eyes closed, breathing slowly, letting the noise in his head settle. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't have a plan. But he knew one thing. He had to say no. Not out loud, not to Jessica. To himself. When he finally returned home, he was calmer, grounded, ready to fix whatever damage had been done. But fate had moved ahead of him. Amanda was in the kitchen, smiling. "Hey, you won't believe this. Jessica's job called. Some emergency. She had to leave immediately." Michael blinked. "She's gone?" "Yep. She packed up while you were out. Said to thank you for the hospitality." Just like that. Gone. Michael stood there, stunned. He should have felt confused, but all he felt was relief. Immense physical relief, like a hand had reached down and pulled him away from a cliff just before he jumped. Amanda went back to tidying up, humming a tune. Michael crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her. She turned, surprised. "Everything okay?" He nodded, holding her tighter. "Yeah, everything's gonna be okay now." Jessica was gone, but the silence she left behind wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. The guest room door stood open. Her scent lingered faintly. Amanda moved around the house as if everything had returned to normal. But Michael wasn't the same man who welcomed Jessica through that front door. Something had broken open in him. Not in a catastrophic way, but in the way that forces you to confront what you've been avoiding. That night, after dinner, Michael and Amanda sat on the couch. The television played some forgettable show neither of them was really watching. Amanda leaned against him, comfortable, familiar. He'd missed this. But even now, with Jessica gone, he felt the weight of everything unspoken,
He muted the TV. "I need to tell you something," he said. Amanda sat up slightly, reading his tone. He didn't ease into it, no dramatics, just honesty. "I've been thinking a lot since Jessica arrived. About you. About us." She didn't speak, but her eyes locked onto his, alert now. "I didn't know how much you'd kept from me. Not just the relationship with her, but what she meant to you. When you told me you dated, I acted like it didn't bother me, but it did. Not because of the past, but because I realized there are parts of you I don't know." Amanda stayed quiet, listening. He continued. "And when she was here, I got caught in something I didn't expect. She said things, did things. I felt tempted, Amanda, and I hated myself for it." Still, she didn't speak. She waited. "I didn't do anything," he added. "But I thought about it, more than I want to admit. And I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you. But the truth is, I think it hurt me more, keeping it inside, letting it build." Amanda finally exhaled. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "Thank you for telling me." "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "I believe you, and I'm not angry, but I'm not going to lie. This stings." He nodded. "It should." For a while they sat in silence. But it wasn't the silence of before, not the suffocating kind that filled their bedroom the night of Jessica's revelation. This one felt raw, yes, but open. Amanda broke it first. "You want to know why I didn't tell you about Jessica? It wasn't just because it was in the past, it's because I didn't know how to explain what it meant. It was messy. She was intense. I cared about her, but I was also afraid of what I became around her. She pulled me into this version of myself I didn't like." Michael listened. "She made me feel wanted, but not safe. You made me feel safe, but maybe I never told you how much I needed that. Maybe I thought you'd think I was boring." Michael reached for her hand. "I never thought that." She smiled faintly. "I know that now." That night, they didn't try to fix everything in one conversation. They didn't pretend that forgiveness erased complexity, but they made a decision, together, to rebuild from truth, not illusion. Over the next few weeks, things shifted. Michael was more open, Amanda more transparent. They talked about their pasts not as threats to their present, but as part of the journey that had led them here. They learned things they hadn't asked before. They shared regrets, and also quiet victories. The memory of Jessica didn't disappear, but it lost its power. It became what it was always meant to be, part of Amanda's story, not a wedge between them. Michael still thought about temptation, about how easily it had crept in. But what stuck with him more was the moment he turned back. The store, the old man, the words from his father, that moment had saved him, not just from a mistake, but from becoming someone he wouldn't respect. One Sunday morning, months later, Michael stood in the kitchen pouring coffee. Amanda came in behind him, kissed his shoulder, and reached for a mug. She smiled. "Still safe?" Michael smiled back. "Always."